We first visited Crete along with our elder daughter and her family in 1993, and during our stay we made the short boat trip from the port of Agios Nikolaos to the island of Spinalonga. At this time we knew very little of the island's history, apart from the fact that it had once been a leper colony. We found the now uninhabited island, which lies across a short stretch of water from the village of Plaka, largely in ruins. Although it was very obvious that a bustling community with houses, shops, hospital and churches had once made its home there. Although we have visited the same area of Crete in September or October every year since then, we had never been back to Spinalonga until 13 years later, in 2006. One of the best sellers of that year was The Island by Victoria Hislop. The story is set on the island of Spinalonga, and although it is a work of fiction, it is well researched and based firmly in fact. Having read the book, we resolved to visit the eponymous island again, and to view it with fresh and better informed eyes. Victoria Hislop's story revolves around the family of Eleni Petrakis, schoolteacher of the village of Plaka, which lies on the coast of Crete adjacent to the island, and her husband Yorgu, a fisherman who supplements his earnings by acting as ferryman between Plaka and Spinalonga. Tragically, Eleni contracts leprosy from one of her pupils and is forced to leave her husband and daughters and move to Spinalonga. The book goes on to describe life on the island up to the point in time when a cure for the disease is found and the patients are able to leave. The fortress of Spinalonga was built by the Venetians in the 16th century. In the early 18th century, the island was occupied by the Turks, and this continued until the early 20th century when, the Greeks having regained control, designated the island as a leper colony. Prior to this, the lepers of Greece had lived isolated lives in huts and caves apart from society, so their move to the island changed their lives for the better. They now had food and a water supply, but life was still very hard. Things improved in the 1920s when a young sufferer who happened to be an Athenian lawyer arrived. He persuaded the government to provide the patients with a generous pension, and things began rapidly to improve. They were able to employ builders from the mainland and soon had a hospital with doctors and nurses, a school, shops, tavernas, a theatre, and even their own newspaper. The community continued until the 1950s, when a cure for leprosy was developed and the remaining patients were able to leave. As on our previous visit, we sailed from the port of Agios Nikolaos, passing Ilunda, the setting of the BBC's Who Pays the Ferryman, on the way.
Shortly on the left-hand side, you will see a small bridge that used to be the narrow passageway between Agios Nikolaos and Ilunda. Just beyond this bridge, they made the very famous British BBC programme Who Pays the Ferryman.
As we approached the island, it seemed very little changed from what we remembered, but we soon realised that a great deal of reconstruction had been undertaken. The large number of visitors so late in the season was also surprising. The entrance tunnel, which had been the depressing point of no return for the lepers, had been restored. The first buildings we saw dated from the time of the Turkish occupation. The channels on the walls are for the collection of rainwater. Situated on the main street, we find 2 tavernas. On Market Street there are several shops. And facing them a number of houses. Up to 320 people live there. Near the landing stage, where visitors from the mainland arrived, we were shown the high-ceilinged disinfection room. To reduce the risk of infection, visitors and workers were allowed to remain for a maximum of only 4 hours before returning to Plaka. On our left can be seen a covered water storage system. This building contained a number of apartments for single people. We followed the path around the edge of the island back towards the place where we had landed. On the way, we passed the Church of St. George. Close to the landing stage, we found the island's cemetery. We were glad we had revisited Spinalonga and were pleased to see that this historic site was not going to be allowed to crumble into oblivion. Although Europe is now almost free from leprosy, it is still very prevalent in the Third World, with 13 million sufferers worldwide.